You're an attorney. You've got many stories through just by cases and trials and things of that nature. Why did you want to dive into this story?
Because it's something that is in everyone's life. Those that are suffering through it, I hope they see that they're not alone when they read this. Because this situation is very true. What my characters go through, others have gone through exactly time and time again. So you're not alone. It's not your fault. You didn't make a mistake. You will see how close it really is in your
Wow.
world.
Wow. Wow. Laura Essay, welcome to the Bookaholic podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yes, glad to have you here today. And you're one of the many attorneys that I have interviewed that have turned to writing books. And I don't know if you guys are being influenced by people like John Grisham or what, but I still am trying to figure out what is it about attorneys and then books. Maybe it's because you guys, through your cases and trials and things of that nature, have so many stories that build up inside of you over time. Do you think that's it?
That has to be part of it. You see so many situations, they think, "Ooh, that could be a fun twist."
Yes.
And you also spend a great deal of time writing. You write every day.
That's right.
You're
That's
either
exactly
drafting
right.
documents, writing memorandums, writing briefs. I mean, you could have, 30, 40 plus page brief that
Right.
has to be very precise, very accurate. And so that probably, lends to the writing process.
Yes, most definitely. Well, you have written a book based on facts, I
Yes,
won't say a true
very much.
story, but based on facts, called Side Effects Are Minimal.
Yes.
And we're going to get into that because that's a kind of play on words. It has to do with the opioid crisis, correct?
Correct. Very much so.
As an attorney, you've had to deal with that. Can you give us a further background of that?
I've seen it a great deal. I mean, all the way back to 80s. It
Wow.
was an issue. People did not even realize, not the issue it is today, but it was
Yes.
there. And it affects everyone. And you know what? It's based on facts. It is a true story, but it's many true stories. It's not just
Yes.
one. And as I did research, I saw some news commentary and read some articles and then thought, how expansive is this? How widespread? So you start looking into it. And it's everywhere, and the stories are so similar. So it is based on so many true stories because this is what's happening in our society.
Well, and we know you're not a medical doctor. We've already
No.
firmly established that you're an attorney.
Right.
But can you describe to us, just in layman's terms, where the opioid crisis began? It just simply began as in medicines for painkillers, correct? And then one thing leads to another. Can you give us a better background of that?
There was a period of time, like I said, this has gone on for decades, that physicians were then introduced to the idea that opioids could be used for everyday pain, chronic pain. Opioids were reserved for cancer patients, post-operative situations, in the hospital. But there was a situation where they sent a patient home with some opioids, and then there was a letter. There's this famous letter, and it's referenced in my book, that opioids could be used for chronic pain. They are not as addictive as we thought. So it went, and there's a pendulum. And again, that's referenced in my story about opiophobia and opioid phobia. From the philia to the phobia, it swings back and forth. And so it was crazy for a while that, I mean, you could, it was a Band-Aid. You could get painkillers for all sorts of things. And even today, it's much, much different. But I've encountered people, and if you talk to anybody out there, it's so close to all of us that people will leave a hospital, leave a situation, and they'll have, 40 opioids. They'll have a handful still That does happen. And then the
Wow.
reason it's gotten so awful is that it is addictive, and there's certain populations that they'll be addicted to the opioid. Well, they can't get any more scripts for it. It's super pricey, but heroin, same thing. So they turn to the street and they can get it for nothing. And there's a direct correlation between opioids and heroin. And 85% of the heroin addicts we see who are just being sucked down the pipe started with a legal physician prescription. 85%
Wow.
of them started that way. They didn't. They were you and me. They weren't. Nobody wakes up and wants to be a drug addict.
No, of
Just
course not.
something happens and you get sucked into that situation.
Wow. 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 And that's tragic. And just give us about what are the names of opioids that we are, people take for granted, but it's an opioid. I can't
Well,
remember any of the names.
Oxycontin, everyone knows about
Oxycontin,
Oxycontin.
that's right.
Mhm, mhm. That's the
Oxycontin.
most familiar.
Yes, 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 yes. And I mean, in the past 10 years, I would say I've had some procedures done, and then they send you home with, I
Yeah,
won't say I was sent home with Oxycontin, but I was sent home with something.
right, right,
And
right.
I
Same
know
thing.
my husband and I, he had a shoulder surgery, and we were very, saying, okay, are you in pain? The other spouse would hold the medication for the other spouse, whoever was in pain.
Right.
And we had made up
Monitor.
our minds, okay, I'm going to take maybe 3 of these pills, and then I'm going to have to fight it out for the rest of the time, and flush the rest down the toilet.
Exactly. I mean, just be careful with it.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
that's all it takes for someone with different chemistry, different biology than you to be addicted. That's
Exactly,
all it would
exactly.
entail.
Well, Side Effects Are Minimal is coming out this July. So
Right.
everybody keep your eyes and ears open for that and go ahead and pre-order it if it's available. And we're going to dive into Claire Hewitt, who is an ambitious attorney, and she finds herself in the center of a harrowing legal battle when she is tasked with representing the Sartoris, one of Philadelphia's most influential families, in a lawsuit surrounding the tragic death of their daughter. So tell us a little bit about this story without giving away any spoilers.
Claire was assigned this case with a new associate as her side chair, and it's a situation that she experienced as a child. Her
Mm.
sister was a gymnast who had a horrific accident, had surgery, got addicted to opioids.
Oh, wow.
And that
Okay.
story then has a lot of other aspects to that. And back then it was was it the opioids? What was the real problem? And now this case is thrown into Claire's lap. It brings back all these memories. It's her chance to prove, hey, something's going on here. We're
Mm-hmm.
losing people and this needs to change. And it gets
Right,
into the scientists who are developing this. It gets into the pharmaceutical industry who's promoting this.
right,
And
right,
it goes through this lawsuit. But those are the things we're familiar with to some degree. I don't think we know how extensive it truly is.
right,
But,
right, right.
and where other novels, fiction stories that are based on this event have occurred, a lot of them, most, revolve around the addict, what the addict
Mhm.
went through, how
Right.
that situation happened. The addict has passed away when my story begins. It's not about
Yes.
that. It's about the whole community and what happens to the people that are left behind. What happens to
Mm-hmm.
the family, what happens to the friends, what happens to the pharmaceutical company, the doctors, how the doctors play off each other. And then the ending of my story is very true. It happens
Right,
all the time. And that I can't tell you because
right,
that's what we don't talk about.
right,
That
right,
was
right,
that was the hard part of my research because I wanted to know how often does this happen? What is the extent of this situation? I found very little. They
wow.
don't talk about it.
Right.
They don't
Exactly.
know what is happening now. This
We
opioid
we
problem.
I was talking with someone this morning, and we were discussing this upcoming interview. And then it was kind of like, we haven't heard anything about the opioid crisis in quite a while. We know it's still there. So
Mm,
maybe that's what you are alluding to, because there for a while, it was a hot topic,
Mhm.
as is in when you're talking about the media. And
Right.
now I hear very little about it. But there's been several movies, say streaming on Netflix, that I can't remember the title of it, but
Dope
they're out
sick is
there.
one of them.
Which one?
Dope sick.
Yes, Dope
That's
Sick is one of them. And one is focusing more on the pharmaceutical company, the
yeah,
family
yeah,
that
yeah,
was involved.
yeah, because Purdue and the Ackler family was a big, huge situation. We heard all about it then.
Yes, 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 yes.
And
So,
and then we heard a lot about the addicts and how many we were losing. We didn't get
mhm,
accurate numbers, I don't believe, on really nationwide how widespread it is. But there
yes,
is still, outside of the addict, angry families. There are situations there where that is a twist that you just don't hear about it.
right,
I don't want to
right.
go into more of that because that is one of the, when you get to the end of the story, you'll be surprised. I,
Wow,
I, I,
wow,
I would be very surprised if you didn't sit back and say, OMG. And that
wow,
happens. It happens all the time. I don't
well, I
know if it
can't,
happens every day. It's not just a couple times a year.
right, right,
People
right,
are
right.
really in trouble with this. And
Yes.
it's scary.
Well, I can't wait to get my hands on a copy of Side Effects Are Minimal. So, why did you write such a story? Again, you're an attorney, you've got many stories through just by cases and trials and things of that nature. Why did you want to dive into this story?
Because it's something that is in everyone's life. I think I wrote for somebody, those that are suffering through it, I hope they see that they're not alone when they read this. Because
Mm,
this situation is very true. What my
hmm.
characters go through, others have gone through exactly time and time again. So you're not alone. It's not your fault. You didn't make a mistake. And for those people who don't think, it really doesn't affect me, it's not that close to me, ask
Right,
around.
right,
Look at your friend's son, your cousin's brother. I mean, things like
right.
that, your cousin's brother, but things like that, it's closer than you really realize because everybody,
Yes.
again, there's a chapter in there that's 6 degrees of separation. It's closer than that. You would find if
Wow,
you even talk about it, you will see how close it really is in your
wow,
world. And
wow.
again, I keep bringing up the ending because those are situations we're familiar with and we talk about. And it could change your world in a heartbeat. It really could. And we don't
Definitely.
realize it until, oh, geez, it happened.
Yes,
That sort of thing.
exactly.
And I think
Exactly.
that's seeing how when I was doing my research, it was curiosity. You see some stories, you're like, oh, is that? I mean, it can't be real. Okay,
Hmm,
you research
hmm,
it, it is. And then it talks
hmm.
about something else. And then it references another one, and then another one. And so you kind of get sucked down the rabbit hole with that. But what's in the rabbit hole blew my mind away.
Wow, wow.
No.
Let's talk about your research, because you're sitting here with your computer or pen and pad, depending on what your writer process looks like, and you say to yourself, I'm going to write a book that is going to be centered around the opioid crisis. There's has to be tons and tomes of that you have to do to research the opioid crisis. What did your research look like? And when you get to a certain point, not just how that road looks like, when do you decide I have enough, from this exhaustive research? When do you decide I have enough and that it is solid evidence for my story?
It's such a liquid process that I didn't start out, I'm going to write a book on this. I'm
Right.
always writing something. I'm just interested in current things. I'm always working on something. And so that, did this really happen? It did. It was a
Mhm,
true story. Did this. And then it
mhm,
led to this. And then it led to
mhm.
that. And then it was, okay, so they're turning from opioids and what are the most popular opioids and how are they getting them and what are the prescriptions and how is that going on? And then I came across the letter that was the start of the opioid
Yes,
epidemic.
I've got to see that letter.
Yeah, that was and it was a letter a physician wrote to the New England Journal of Medicine, and I changed the name there completely, but it's fact. I mean, that's research it. But then it led to something else, and then it grew, and it wrote itself because I had no idea. And as you fictionalize these characters, you can give them a little more leeway to show what they'll really do. And I added some legalities in it for the
Yeah,
fun, just to make it more fun.
right.
Um, Dana, she's the attorney who's Claire's nemesis.
Oh,
She did some things that are not factual. They're
okay.
unrelated to opioids. Everything with opioids is 100% true. She did some naughty things just because that's the kind of person she is. And it
Right.
made the story more fun.
Right,
And
right,
those
right.
are things that I had no idea. My great grandfather was a writing professor, and he always said, let the story write itself. Just, it will
Oh,
do. And it did. I had all the research, and it kept going and it kept going and it wrote itself. And I keep referring to this ending. When I came across that this was how the story was ending for a lot of people, that I thought, all right, I'm not going to go farther with that because my research was cut off. I can't tell you, like I said, how many times a day, a week, a month this occurs. I just can tell
wow.
you it's often enough that it's out there. And I
Right,
thought, you know what, just show the reader this is how this story's
right,
ending, and it
right.
will be like, oh my goodness, this is what happens. And I thought it's a
Wow.
dramatic ending to show how bad this situation is and what
Mm.
the turn it's taken.
Wow. Well, you're right, and you've said previously that a lot of stories don't focus on the folks that's left behind. In this story, the addict is already deceased. So, Claire, being a family member, the attorney, our protagonist in this book, she's left behind, of course, but from her sister's situation. And
Right.
she feels a heavy burden of guilt related to her
Mhm.
sister's death. Can you go into a little bit of that and tie it into people that's left behind after the addict? Is it the fact that they don't see the addiction that leaves them with the feeling of guilt?
Do they not see it, or do they not want to see it? Do they disguise it? Do they make
Uh,
it something else? And
uh,
it's not hidden that her sister, post-operative painkillers was her thing. Well,
right.
so where do you draw the line? And when that situation occurred was during an opioidophilia stage of medicine, that it was fine. She could take some, she's not gonna be addicted, just a little bit more, just a little bit. Well, she started sneaking them. She needed
Uh,
more. And that's the thing with painkillers. If you take one and it takes care of it. And I don't
right.
know the number. It varies based on every individual. But two, okay, three, all right, pretty soon that one pill's not going to do it. So now I'll have to take two. The
Right.
chemistry, I do know the chemistry and biology in your body alters on opioids.
Oh,
Guaranteed that. I mean,
wow.
that is a fact. And I
Wow.
can't go into the details of how that works. I'm not in
Right.
healthcare or science at all.
Right.
But
Right.
because of that, you need more. So I used to take one pill and I'd be okay. Well, now I have to take two. Well, now I
Well,
have to
let
take
me
three.
now again, like you said, you're not in healthcare or science, but I wonder if you saw evidence of this in some of your research. So, a person is usually legally prescribed an opioid. They
Mhm.
are in pain. They take the pills per prescription. Then it becomes more and more of an addiction. Now, in some of the cases, have you found that the person is still, let's say it's like, I don't know, a year later, is the person still in pain or are they just addicted?
That's the big question. They think they have pain. They are in
Oh,
pain. If you ask them, they are in pain.
okay.
What is
Okay.
pain? Now, what is their pain? Your brain changes. And I do touch on that in the manuscript as well. Your brain changes on opioids. So what
Right.
you were perceiving, having never taken an opioid, as pain is different once you've taken 6 months of opioids. After 3 months, your chances of being addicted skyrocket.
Whew.
But it does, it
Wow.
changes the chemistry in your brain or the biology in your brain. I'm not sure exactly of what the correct terminology is, but I have medical documents showing that that's been proven. It does change you. And
Ugh.
so you're not the same. And
Mm.
as far as the people left behind, you're going to feel guilty that as a mother, I bought the pills, I took her to the doctor, I took him to the
Yes.
doctor, or as a
Yeah.
spouse, I didn't monitor. I saw that empty
Right.
bottle and I
Right.
didn't ask.
Right. Right. Right.
And
Right.
you will question what you could have done.
Yes.
And
Yes.
chances
Ugh.
are not anything.
Right, 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 right. Wow. Well, the Sartoris in your book, they're the prominent Philadelphia
Yes.
family. And so, how does their status influence the dynamics of the lawsuit then and Claire's involvement?
I use their status and an influential family, a strong family of that nature, to show anybody. These aren't poor people that couldn't afford drug or couldn't, that took some back alley route to their medication. No, these are people that control a lot.
Right,
And he controls a lot of the city. And he's a real estate tycoon and he owns a lot and he's a strong man and he can't control this.
right,
It shows
right.
that as a society and as individuals, it's bigger than we are.
Yes.
He could not control it. He couldn't bring his daughter back.
Oh, yeah. You're
And
already giving me goosebumps about this book because I'm
it's
like, oh, wow, this has got to be a really great read. Well, the pursuit of justice often comes with sacrifices. Can you discuss the moral dilemmas that Claire faces as she navigates the legal and ethical complexities of the case?
pointing of when someone is deceased, especially in this situation, pointing fingers is difficult. And it's difficult to point it to the doctor because he tried. That's the thing. So often it's the doctors that are blamed. And many,
Right.
many,
Yes.
many are good, great people.
Yes.
So does she point the finger there? Is she just reliving a childhood guilt trip and going to make someone pay? Just revenge, 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 but which
Right.
isn't right either, because
Right.
it's pointing a finger without finding an answer.
Right.
And she's also taking on the pharmaceutical industry that is ginormous and bottomless.
Yes.
They've got it all, and here she is, a single attorney. It's reference to a class action suit, so it's not just this isolated. But I don't get into all of that because that was too
Right.
much of a. It takes away from some of the things I wanted to bring out in the story.
Right.
But she's faced with how to deal with these. She sees her mother in Margot, which is Emma's mother. Emma's the girl who died. She sees her mother in her face and her
Mm-hmm.
father and
Mm-hmm.
relives a lot of that. And you have
Mm-hmm.
to, when you're reliving something, you have to ask yourself, am I doing the right thing or am I just in my own little pity party? And so
Right.
she's
Right.
going
Right.
through situations where she's having to juggle her emotions with her legal responsibilities.
Right, right, right. Well, Claire, our protagonist, she's definitely, by taking on this case, she's triggered. And I would think with the volume of this opioid crisis, if you pick up this book, you may also be triggered depending
Mm,
on if your relationship with the opioid crisis. You could be triggered as well
yes, very
by
much
even
so.
reading this.
And
Yes.
I'm also hoping that everyone looks at the drug addicts with a little less judgment because we don't know
Yes.
where it started. You can be
Yes.
going downtown to a restaurant, a theater, and you could see someone in the corner in the alley and
Yeah.
have a thought. Hopefully,
Right.
it's a kinder thought because you don't know. That could have been the CEO of a company a few
Yes.
years ago.
Right.
And
You
now
just don't
that's what
know.
happened. You just don't know. So I'm hoping it will enlighten a lot of people on the situations bigger than we are and to just have a more open approach to it.
Yes, most definitely. Well, you've taken on a huge, huge subject in your first book, right?
Yes, yes, it
Yes,
is.
your debut novel. So, well, what are you looking at next? Are you going to write another book or?
I am. I've actually started two, so I've got to narrow it down and pick something. And I don't want to be, it's not on opioids. I'm not the opioid writer. I'm not in healthcare, and that's not my area of focus.
Right.
I'm a fiction writer, maybe a memoir writer. I am very drawn to current events. I'm drawn
Yes,
to what's
I see
going on
that.
around us because I
Yes.
think there's so much, good and bad, that's happening
Hmm.
around us
Hmm.
that we don't really talk about. And I think in sharing that and researching, getting the true stories out there, I think that is just, it's a neat process and it's fun to be a part of that.
Wow. Well, that sounds intriguing, and definitely your book sounds intriguing. Folks, check out Side Effects Are Minimal wherever books are sold. And also, we'll have Laura's contact information and the podcast show notes, as well as the video description box on my YouTube channel. Laura, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today.
you. Thank you
All
so
right.
much. This was wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Remember, Side Effects Are Minimal is coming out this July. Keep your eyes peeled for it.